I spent 6 months rebuilding the bridge with my parents, only for them to torch it in front of 40 guests. On the night of my 30th birthday, my father gripped the microphone and announced they were formally disowning me. The room froze. They expected a meltdown, a daughter fleeing in tears. Instead, I stepped forward, took the mic from his hand, and gave them exactly what they didn't want: a calm, surgical truth. The invite said 7 o'clock, but I was there at 6. I needed the hour to breathe. The Cobalt Room at the Warren Harbor Historic District was exactly what I wanted for my 30th birthday. Exposed brick, warm industrial lighting, and enough space to feel intimate without feeling crowded. It was a space that said I was an adult, that I had my own taste, and most importantly, that I was paying for it myself. I stood by the window overlooking the harbor, smoothing the fabric of my dress. It was a deep emerald green, a color I wore when I wanted to feel bulletproof. I needed to feel bulletproof tonight. Turning 30 felt like a threshold. I had spent the last year meticulously reconstructing my life after a chaotic 29th year that I still refused to discuss in detail with anyone but my therapist. I had a new apartment on the north side, a promotion to senior analyst at Bayside Analytics Group, and a fragile, carefully glued peace treaty with my parents. That treaty was the only reason Graham and Lorna Brooks were on the guest list. We had spent 6 months in a Cold War followed by 3 months of polite, terrifying détente. We talked about the weather. We talked about traffic. We never talked about the argument that had nearly shattered us the previous autumn. When I told them I was hosting a party, my mother had immediately pivoted into management mode. "I want to pay for the cake," she had said over the phone 2 weeks ago. "And the champagne toast?" "No, Mom," I had replied. "I have it covered." "Nonsense," she had insisted, her voice tight and bright. "It is a milestone. Sadie, let us do something. Let us be parents." I had relented. It seemed like a small price to pay for peace. Standing in the empty room now, watching the catering staff set up the glassware, I wondered if I had made a tactical error. My mother did not do gifts. She did investments. The heavy oak doors opened, and my stomach gave a sharp, familiar twist. They were early. Of course they were early. Graham and Lorna Brooks entered the room like they were boarding a yacht. My father wore a navy blazer that cost more than my first car, and my mother was in a stiff, cream-colored suit that looked aggressive against the warm brick of the venue. She was smiling, but it was not her warm smile. It was her camera-ready smile, the one she used for Christmas cards and board dinners. "Sadie," she said, crossing the room. The heels of her shoes clicked against the polished concrete floor like a countdown. "You look healthy." "Thanks, Mom," I said, accepting a hug that involved no actual pressure. "You look great." My father nodded at me, checking his watch. "Happy birthday, kid. The room is decent, a bit dark. It is atmospheric." "Dad," I said. He hummed, a non-committal sound I had heard my whole life, and immediately pulled his phone from his pocket. He tapped out a message, his brow furrowed. He had been doing that for weeks, always checking, always texting, always looking like he was managing a crisis that no one else could see. The catering manager walked over with the champagne list, and my father waved him off. "We will take the vintage we discussed," Graham said, "and make sure the glasses are filled by 8 sharp. We have a schedule." I frowned. "It is just a party." "Dad, there is no schedule." He did not look up from his phone. "There is always a schedule." "Sadie." By 7:30, the room had filled with the low, comfortable hum of conversation. I had kept the list tight. There were about 40 people total. Most were friends from my yoga studio or college, plus a solid crew from Bayside Analytics. Tessa, my best friend since freshman orientation, was by the bar, making the bartender laugh. Seeing her grounded me. She knew the truth about my family, or at least as much as I allowed myself to say. I circulated, holding a glass of sparkling water, accepting hugs and jokes about entering my 3rd decade. I felt a tentative relief. Maybe this would be okay. Maybe we really were just a normal family having a normal party. Then I noticed the cluster. Near the back of the room, by the fire exit, stood 4 people I did not invite. They were older, in their 60s, dressed with the quiet, drab expense of old money. I recognized one of them vaguely, a woman named Miriam Voss, who played bridge with my mother years ago. The others were strangers. They were not drinking. They were not mingling. They stood in a tight circle, watching the room with grim politeness. I walked over to my mother, who was adjusting a floral arrangement that did not need adjusting. "Mom," I asked, keeping my voice low, "who are those people by the door?" She did not look at me. "Old friends. We ran into them. It would have been rude not to include them." "You ran into 4 people dressed for a funeral and brought them to my birthday?" I asked. "Don't be dramatic." "Sadie," she snapped, her smile never wavering for a passing waiter. "They are here to support us." "Support us?" I asked. "Support the family," she corrected. "Go say hello to your friends. You are the hostess. Act like one." The warning bells in my head, usually a distant chime, began to clang. Support the family. It was a phrase they used when they were circling the wagons. But why circle the wagons at a birthday party? I moved back toward my friends, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Tessa caught my arm. "Hey," she said, scanning my face. "You okay? Your dad looks like he's waiting for a SWAT team, and your mom is vibrating. They are just being them," I said, forcing a laugh. "You know how they get about hosting. They think if the napkins aren't folded into swans, civilization collapses." Tessa didn't smile. She looked past me. "Speaking of civilization collapsing, look who just walked in." I turned. My sister, Marlo, had arrived. Marlo was 27, beautiful in a way that required 3 hours of maintenance a day, and currently wearing a dress that cost 3 times my rent. It was silver, backless, and screamed for attention. She was carrying a gift bag the size of a suitcase. She spotted me and launched herself across the room. "Sadie!" she cried out. The volume was just a little too high, a little too performed. She hugged me, and I smelled expensive gin and something metallic, like nervous sweat. "I am so sorry I'm late," she said, pulling back. "You know how the bridge is. But I am here. The big 30. God, you are old. Glad you made it." "Mar," I said. She shoved the massive bag into my arms. "Open it. Now. You have to—" "Marlo, I can open it later." "No, now," she insisted. "Everyone needs to see." I looked around. A few people were watching. To avoid a scene, I reached into the bag and pulled out the tissue paper. Beneath it was a handbag. It was beige, covered in logos, and incredibly structured. It was the kind of bag a politician's wife would carry to a luncheon. It was beautiful, expensive, and absolutely not me. I hadn't carried a logo bag since high school. "Oh, wow," I said. "Marlo, this is too much." "It is for your new job," she said, beaming. "A serious bag for a serious woman. Second chances, right?" The phrase landed like a stone. Second chances. I looked at her. Her eyes were wide, glittering, but there was a tightness at the corners. She looked terrified. "Thank you," I said, handing the bag to Tessa to hold. "It is generous." Marlo grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and downed half of it in one swallow. "Dad wants to do the toast soon," she said. "I need to go find him." She darted away before I could ask what she meant by second chances. I spent the next 20 minutes in a haze of anxiety. I drank water. I smiled. I tried to listen to my coworker Ben talk about the new data visualization software we were implementing, but my eyes kept darting to my parents. They were huddled with the group of strangers. My father was showing them something on his phone. At 8:15, the music cut out. My father tapped a spoon against his glass. He was standing on the small riser at the front of the room, where the DJ had set up a microphone. My mother stood next to him, her hands clasped in front of her waist. Marlo stood slightly behind them, looking at the floor. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Graham boomed. His voice was practiced, resonant. He was a man who served on boards. He knew how to hold a room. The chatter died down. My friends turned, smiling. expecting the usual embarrassing dad speech, stories about me in diapers, or the time I crashed the car. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Sadie," he said. 30 years. It is a long time. He paused. It felt too long. "Lorna and I have done a lot of thinking lately," he continued. "About time, about values, about what it means to be a family." I stood near the cake table, my hands cold. Something was wrong. The air in the room felt thin. "We love our daughter," my mother added. She leaned into the mic my father was holding. Her voice was trembling, but it sounded curated, like an actress playing a mother in distress. "We love her enough to tell the truth." My father nodded. He looked out at the crowd. But he did not look at me. He looked over my head, at the back wall. "Sadie has had a difficult few years," he said. "We have tried to help. We have covered debts. We have offered guidance. We have opened our home again and again, but there comes a point where love means drawing a line." The room went deadly silent. Tessa, standing next to me, stiffened. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration," Graham said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming grave. "But we cannot in good conscience celebrate a lie. We are here to announce that, as of tonight, we are formally disowning Sadie." A gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a movie gasp. It was a sharp, sucked-in breath of confusion. "We will no longer support her choices," he went on, reading from a mental script. "We will no longer finance her lifestyle. And we will no longer allow her instability to endanger the legacy of this family. We are doing this to protect her. And to protect ourselves. We hope she finds the help she needs." He lowered the mic. For 3 seconds, no one moved. My body went cold. It wasn't the heat of embarrassment. It was the absolute zero of shock. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands, my feet. I felt like I was floating above the scene, looking down at a woman in a green dress who had just been executed in front of her coworkers. But then, the analyst in me woke up. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the floor, a picture of tragic resolve. But her hands were perfectly still. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She was waiting. I looked at my father. He was putting the mic back on the stand with a strange, satisfied finality. I looked at the cluster of strangers in the back. The woman, Miriam Voss, was holding her phone up. The red light was on. She was recording. This wasn't an outburst. This wasn't a drunken holiday fight. This was a press conference. Tessa grabbed my arm. Her grip painful. "Sadie, let's go," she hissed. "Right now. We are leaving." Ben from work stepped forward, looking horrified. "Sir, that is—" I held up a hand to stop Ben. I gently peeled Tessa's fingers off my arm. "No," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, hollow. "Sadie, do not engage," Tessa whispered. "They are crazy. Let's just go. If I leave, I make it true," I said. I could feel the adrenaline flooding my system, but instead of making me shake, it made me sharp. I saw the geometry of the trap. If I ran out crying, I was the unstable daughter they just described. If I screamed, I was the hysterical burden. They had built a stage, and they had cast me as the villain. I walked toward the riser. The sound of my heels on the concrete was the only noise in the room. Guests parted for me, their eyes wide, their faces masks of pity and horror. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on my father. He looked surprised as I approached. He had expected me to flee. He took a half step back as I reached the microphone stand. I didn't try to take the mic from him. I just reached out and adjusted the height. Tilting it down slightly, I took a breath. I didn't know what I was going to say until the words were in my mouth. I looked at the crowd. I saw my boss, looking confused. I saw my friends, looking ready to fight. "I'm not going to argue with my parents tonight," I said. The microphone amplified the tremor in my voice, but I didn't try to hide it. I let it be there. I am not going to scream. I am not going to cry. I turned to look at my father. He was refusing to meet my eyes. "But I will correct one thing," I said. my voice hardening. "You said you will no longer finance my lifestyle." I looked back at the audience. "I have been financially independent since I was 22. I said clearly, I paid for my apartment. I paid for my car. I paid for my degree. I have not asked Graham or Lorna Brooks for a single dollar in 8 years." My mother's head snapped up. This was off script. I paused, letting that sink in. I wanted the recording phone in the back to catch every syllable. "I will not accept a narrative that paints me as a burden to excuse cruelty," I said. Then I turned fully to my parents. I looked at my mother, who was now clutching her pearls, her eyes darting around the room to gauge the reaction. "I have one question," I said. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar. "If this is about boundaries," I asked, keeping my voice low and level, "why did you insist on paying for tonight?" My mother faltered. It was a tiny thing, a blink, a slight part of her lips as she searched for an answer that wasn't there. She looked at my father for help, but he was frozen. "You insisted on paying for the cake." I continued. "You insisted on the champagne. You forced your way into the planning of this party, if you're so desperate to cut me off. Why did you fight so hard to buy the microphone you're using to do it?" The air in the room shifted. It wasn't pity anymore. It was confusion. It was suspicion. The guests looked from me to my parents. They saw a woman standing tall in a green dress, asking a logical question, and they saw two parents who looked like they had been caught in a lie. My father stepped forward, his face reddening. "This is exactly what we mean," he said, but his voice lacked the earlier resonance. It sounded petty, always twisting things. I did not let him finish. I leaned into the mic one last time. "I am not embarrassed by the truth." I said to the room, "I am embarrassed by theater." I stepped back. "Thank you all for coming. I am going to go home now. Please, have some cake." My parents bought it. I walked off the riser. This time, the silence was different. It was the silence of respect. Uneasy, terrified respect. "Sadie," Tessa said, appearing at my elbow again. She looked like she wanted to punch someone. "I have the car out front. Let's go." I nodded. I didn't look back at my parents. I didn't look at Marlo, who was standing by the wall, pale as a sheet, clutching her wine glass with both hands. I walked to the gift table to grab my purse. My hands were finally starting to shake. I needed to get out before the adrenaline crashed. I reached for my clutch, which I had left behind the stack of gifts. But as I grabbed it, I noticed something. The table had been disturbed. The cards, which had been in a neat pile, were scattered. I frowned. I had tucked a specific envelope under the largest card earlier that evening. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with no stamp. It was a note I had received 3 days ago in the mail, from my great-aunt Eleanor, who had passed away 4 years ago. Her executor had finally forwarded it, timed for my 30th birthday. I hadn't read it yet. I wanted to save it for a quiet moment. It was gone. I lifted the gift bags. I checked the floor. It wasn't there. I looked up. My parents were arguing in hushed tones near the exit. My father was shoving his phone back into his pocket. Marlo was nowhere to be seen. "Sadie?" Tessa asked urgently. "What is it? Something is missing." I said, "Screw the gifts. Sadie, we need to leave." "It wasn't a gift," I said. I looked at the empty spot on the table. A cold realization settled over me. Heavier than the shock of the disowning, the recording, the rehearsal speech, the older witnesses, the distraction of the toast. They hadn't just come here to humiliate me. They hadn't just come to cause a scene. They came to take something. This wasn't a family breakdown. It was a heist. I grabbed my purse. "Drive," I told Tessa. As we walked out into the cool night air of Warren Harbor, I didn't cry. I was too busy calculating. They wanted me to be the victim. They wanted me broken, but they had made a mistake. They thought they were disowning a daughter. They forgot they were attacking an analyst, and I was going to figure out exactly what they were hiding. The morning after my 30th birthday did not feel like a hangover. It felt like the quiet, dusty aftermath of a demolition. I woke up at 6 o'clock. staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to the traffic on the street below. For a few seconds, I floated in the blissful ignorance of sleep. And then the memory of the microphone, the cold stare of my father, and the flash of the recording phone crashed down on me. I rolled over and grabbed my phone. It was hot to the touch, vibrating with a backlog of notifications I had ignored since the night before. The screen was a wall of text. My friends were a chorus of outrage. Tessa had sent 12 messages, mostly variations of swear words and offers to burn down my parents' house. Ben from work had sent a polite, confused text. "Hey, hope you are okay. That was intense. Let me know if you need coverage on the Monday report." But nestled between the concern and the shock was a notification that made my stomach turn over. It was an email. The sender was Graham Brooks. The subject line was 2 words, "Formal notice." I sat up, pulling the duvet around my shoulders. I opened the email. There was no greeting, no, "Dear Sadie," just a block of text and an attachment. Attached is a formal statement of estrangement regarding your status within the Brooks family. As stated last night, we are severing financial and social ties effective immediately. We ask that you respect our privacy and do not attempt to contact us or visit the residence. This measure is necessary for the preservation of our family's well-being. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF, formatted like a legal contract. Though it held no actual court authority, it listed grievances in vague, bulleted points, repeated instability, financial irresponsibility, breach of family trust. It looked official. It looked like something you would hand to a judge. I put the phone down on the nightstand and walked into the kitchen. I made coffee. I drank it standing up. I did not cry. I was an analyst. When the data is bad, you do not weep over the spreadsheet. You look for the error. I met Tessa at a diner halfway between my apartment and the office. She looked worse than I did. Her eyeliner was smudged, and she was shredding a paper napkin into tiny, snowy piles. "You look terrifyingly calm," she said as I slid into the booth. "I am not calm," I said. "I am processing." She shook her head. "They are monsters. Sadie, literal monsters. The way your dad stood there, like he was reading a quarterly earnings report. And your mom, God, the way she looked at the camera." I paused, my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. "Wait, you saw her look at the camera?" Tessa nodded. "Yeah, the lady with the phone? Miriam? Your mom looked right at her before your dad started speaking. It was like a cue." I set the cup down. "A cue. I need you to tell me exactly who was in that back group." I said, "I was too focused on my parents." Tessa squinted, thinking. "There was Miriam Voss, her husband, I think, a short guy with a cane, and that tall man with the silver hair. The one in the gray suit. He looked like he smelled like expensive scotch and litigation. Reed Halston." I said. The name tasted like ash. "Who is he?" Tessa asked. "He is a lawyer," I said, "but not just a lawyer. He handles high net worth disputes. He does estate planning for people who have more money than God and hate their children. My parents know him from the club, but they are not close friends. He would not be at a birthday party for a daughter he has never met. Unless he was working." Tessa said quietly. "Exactly." I said, "You do not invite Reed Halston for cake. You invite him to witness an execution." I checked the time. "I have to go to work." "Sadie, call in sick." Tessa pleaded. "You cannot go in there. Half the team was at the party. If I hide, I validate their story." I said, "They called me unstable. If I call out sick the next day, I look unstable. I have to go in. I have to be perfect." I walked into Bayside Analytics at 9 o'clock sharp. The office was quiet. The usual Monday morning hum of keyboards and espresso machines. As I walked to my desk, heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. I could feel the eyes on my back, heavy and curious. I sat down, turned on my monitor, and opened my email. I was halfway through a query on the Q3 projection data when a shadow fell across my desk. It was David, my manager. He was a good guy, soft-spoken. usually averse to any form of conflict. He looked uncomfortable. "Sadie, do you have a minute?" he asked. "Sure. David," I said, keeping my voice bright. We walked to his office. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit. He did not sit behind his desk. He sat in the chair next to me, which was always a bad sign. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I am fine." I said, "The party was a bit dramatic." "I know. I apologize if it made anyone uncomfortable." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Sadie, you know I value you. Your work on the logistics account was stellar. But I received an email late last night to the general HR inbox. It was flagged to me this morning. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my hands folded in my lap. From whom?" "Your sister," David said. "Marlo Brooks." I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes. "Of course. She said she was worried about you." David continued, choosing his words carefully. "She mentioned a breakdown? She said you have been under a lot of financial pressure and that your family is concerned about your mental state. She wanted us to be aware in case there were incidents at the workplace." I stared at him. The brilliance of it was sickening. Marlo hadn't demanded I be fired. She had framed it as concern. She had planted a seed of doubt so that every time I made a mistake, every time I looked tired, every time I disagreed with a colleague, HR would see it as a symptom. I took a slow breath. "David, I want to be very clear. I have no history of mental instability. I have no financial trouble. My credit score is near perfect. My family and I are in the middle of a personal dispute regarding an inheritance issue, and they are using reputational damage as a lever." David looked surprised. "An inheritance issue?" "Yes." I lied. Or maybe I wasn't lying. I didn't know yet, but it sounded rational. It sounded like something a lawyer would say. Not a crazy woman. "I would like a copy of that email." I said, "For my records, I am not sure I can—" "If a third party is making medical claims about me to my employer—" "David, I have a right to see it. I need to protect myself." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I will forward it. Just take it easy today, okay?" I walked back to my desk and opened the forwarded email. Subject: Urgent concern regarding Sadie Brooks, to Human Resources. I am writing this with a heavy heart to give you a heads up about my sister. Sadie. We had a difficult incident last night where she became quite aggressive publicly. We are working to get her the help she needs, but we wanted her employer to be aware that she is struggling with some significant delusions right now. We hope you can support her during this time. Best, Marlo Brooks. It was dated 11:30 at night, 3 hours after the party. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Evidence. I dragged the email inside. Then I opened a blank document and started a timeline. Incident 1, the party. Incident 2, the disowning speech. Incident 3, the email to HR. I was building a case. I just didn't know what the crime was yet. At 5 o'clock, I left the office. I didn't go home. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. It was a sprawling colonial on a street lined with oak trees. I had grown up there. I knew the creak of the third step on the porch. I knew the way the light hit the foyer in the afternoon. I parked my car a block away and walked up. I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted my things. In the chaos of the night before, I realized I had left a box of childhood journals and photo albums in the guest room closet. I had meant to take them weeks ago, but I had hesitated, thinking it would look like I was leaving for good. Now, I was leaving for good. I walked up the driveway. The house was dark. My parents' cars were gone, probably at the club, maintaining appearances. I took my key off my ring. It was a brass key I had carried since I was 16. I slid it into the lock on the front door. It didn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. It wouldn't even slide all the way in. I stepped back and looked at the lock. It was new. Shiny nickel, not the weathered brass that had been there yesterday. They had changed the locks. "Hey, Sadie!" I turned. Mrs. Gable, the neighbor from next door, was standing by her hedge, holding a garden hose. She looked awkward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Hi," Mrs. Gable? I said, trying to smile. Just came to pick up some boxes. She bit her lip. Oh, honey, I don't think they are there. What do you mean? The truck, she said. The moving truck. It was here 2 days ago. Thursday morning. Thursday. 2 days before the party. 2 days before the sudden decision to disown me. They took a bunch of stuff out. Mrs. Gable said, Your dad said they were clearing out the attic and the spare rooms, making space for a home gym or something. I saw them take out that old desk of yours, and the boxes with the stickers. My stomach dropped. Where did they take them? She shrugged. I don't know. A donation center? Or maybe the dump. I saw the truck heading toward the highway. I felt a wave of nausea, my journals, the photos of me and my grandmother, the only physical proof that I had once been a child in this house, that I had been loved. Thank you. Mrs. Gable, I said. My voice was paper thin. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They didn't just lock me out, they erased me. And they did it 48 hours before they told me why. I took out my phone to call my dad, to scream at him, but I stopped. My signal bars were grayed out. No service. I stared at the screen. I was on the family plan. I had been meaning to switch for years, but it was one of those administrative tasks that always fell to the bottom of the list. I drove to the nearest coffee shop and used the Wi-Fi. I logged into my bank account. The joint savings account I had opened with my mother when I was 18, the one with maybe $50 in it that I never used, was gone, closed. I tried to log into the storage unit account where I kept my winter tires. Access denied. User not found. It was systematic. They were cutting every digital and physical cord that connected us. But it wasn't just about separation. It was about creating a record. If anyone looked at the timeline later, it would look like I had been cut off for weeks. It would look like a long-term estrangement, not an ambush. They were backdating the reality of our relationship. The next morning, I took a half day from work. I went to the Warren Harbor Community Legal Clinic. It was a small, cramped office above a dry cleaner, smelling faintly of steam and old carpet. I sat across from a woman named Elena, a consumer law advisor who looked like she hadn't slept in a decade. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. So, let me get this straight, Elena said, capping her pen. You are 30, you are employed, you live alone. And your parents disowned you into a microphone? Yes, I said. Elena sighed. Look, Sadie, legally speaking, disowning isn't really a thing for independent adults. You aren't a minor. They don't have custody. They can stop inviting you to dinner. They can stop sending you birthday cards. But they can't divorce you. I handed her the formal notice document my father had emailed. What about this? She glanced at it and snorted. This is garbage. It is a Word document dressed up in a tuxedo. It has no legal standing. It is theater. Then why do it? I asked. Why the spectacle? Why the lawyer in the room? Why change the locks beforehand? Elena tapped her pen on the desk. That is the question. Usually, when people go to this much trouble to create a paper trail of estrangement, it is because there is money involved. Real money. Trusts, wills, anticipated inheritance. My parents are comfortable. I said, but they aren't tycoons. Elena leaned forward. Are you sure? Or are you sure of what they have told you? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. If there is a trust, Elena said, specifically a generation-skipping trust or something from a grandparent, there might be clauses. Morality clauses. Sometimes, a beneficiary can be removed if they are convicted of a crime, or if they bring public disrepute to the family. Public disrepute, the microphone, the recording, Marlowe's toast about second chances, the email to HR about my instability. They weren't just embarrassing me, they were manufacturing a breach of contract. I left the clinic with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. I needed to find out what triggered this. And I remembered the one thing that didn't fit the narrative, the missing envelope. I drove to the venue, The cobalt room was empty. The staff cleaning up from a corporate lunch. I found the manager, a guy named Leo, who had been kind to me during the booking process. "Leo," I asked, "I know it has been 2 days, but I'm still looking for an envelope. It was on the gift table, cream-colored, handwriting on the front." Leo frowned. "Oh, right, the lost and found. We found a stack of papers and some cards under the table when we swept up that night." My heart leaped. "Do you have them?" "No," Leo said. "Your family picked them up yesterday." "Who?" I asked. "Which family member?" Leo scratched his head. "I wasn't here. The morning shift lead said a woman came in. Said she was Mrs. Brooks. Said she was collecting the rest of the party items." We handed over the folder. "Lorna, my mother had gone back to the scene of the crime to scrub the evidence. She knew the envelope was there. She must have seen it during the party. Or maybe she realized later that something from Aunt Eleanor was missing from the equation." "Can you describe the woman?" I asked. "Blonde, expensive coat, scary smile?" Leo offered. "That is her," I said. I walked back to my car, feeling a cold fury rising in my chest. They had the note, the one thing my grandmother had wanted me to have. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I would ignore it, but my adrenaline was so high I answered without thinking. "This is Sadie." I said, "Sadie." The voice was warm, raspy, and sounded like a ghost. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. "Aunt Diane?" I asked. Diane Brooks Keller was my father's older sister, the black sheep, the one who had moved to New Mexico in the 90s and never came back. I had met her maybe 3 times in my life. "I heard about the party," she said. "News travels, even to Santa Fe." "Who told you?" Diane laughed. A dry crackling sound. Marlo posted a vague, tragic status update on social media about praying for her sister. I read between the lines. I called Reed Halston's office and pretended to be a concerned investor. "His secretary is chatty. Reed Halston was there." I said, "I know." Diane said. Her voice dropped, becoming serious. "Listen to me. Sadie. They are doing it again." "Doing what again?" "What they did to your cousin Mark. What they did to me. They are rewriting the story." I gripped the phone. "Aunt Diane, what are you talking about?" "There is a trust. Sadie. Mom, your grandmother Eleanor, left things complicated. She didn't trust Graham. She thought he was too obsessed with image, so she tied up the assets. I never knew about a trust." I said, "That is by design." Diane said, "If you don't know you have rights, you can't fight for them. But Graham is cash poor right now. I hear things, bad investments in commercial real estate. He needs liquidity, and the only way to get into the principle of the trust is if the other beneficiaries are removed." "Removed how?" "By proving they are unfit," Diane said, "or by getting them to sign away their claim voluntarily." My blood ran cold. "They pushed me out 20 years ago," Diane said. "Made me look like a drug addict because I smoked pot in college. They threatened to tell my employer. I signed a waiver just to get them to stop. I took a payout and left, but I won't sign." I said, "They know that." Diane said, "That is why they are breaking you first. If you are unstable, if you are disowned, you are vulnerable. They will offer you a deal, a way back in, a way to stop the pain of the HR emails, the pain of the neighbors whispering, the pain of the changed locks." "Sadie," Diane said, "do not sign anything, no matter what they send you. Do not sign." I promised her I wouldn't. We hung up, and I sat in the silence of my car, looking at the gray harbor water. I drove home. I checked my mailbox. Inside was a single, rigid envelope. It was certified mail. Return receipt requested. The return address was Halston Associates. I walked up the stairs to my apartment, my legs feeling heavy. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a waiver. Voluntary relinquishment of beneficiary interest in Brooks Orchard Holdings and associated trusts. It was a dense, 3-page document filled with legal jargon. But the summary was clear. I, Sadie Brooks, was voluntarily stepping aside to allow the primary trustees, Graham and Lorna, to manage the assets for the greater good of the family estate in exchange for signing. I would receive a one-time compassionate gift of $10,000. $10,000 to sign away. What? I didn't even know what Brooks Orchard Holdings was. But then my eyes caught the date at the bottom of the signature line. The document was dated. It was already filled in. Date of execution, October 14th. My birthday was October 28th. The letter was dated 2 weeks ago. They had drawn this up before the party. They had drawn this up while my mother was ordering the cake. They had planned to present this to me, and the disowning was just the leverage they needed to make me take the $10,000 and run. They wanted me to think I was saving myself from humiliation, but the timeline proved the humiliation was just a tool. I looked at the paper. I looked at the date. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the document. Then I took a picture of the date. I wasn't going to sign it. I was going to use it to burn them to the ground. The document on my kitchen table was not just a legal waiver. It was a map. I spent the next 3 hours treating it like a data set. I am an analyst. I do not guess. I verify. The header listed the asset in question as Brooks Orchard Holdings. The name sounded familiar. Dusty. Something from my childhood summers. I remembered apple trees and a small, white farmhouse where my grandmother, Eleanor, used to make jam that was always too tart. But I also remembered my father complaining 20 years ago that the orchard was a money pit, a tax liability that they had finally managed to dissolve after my grandfather died. I opened my laptop and logged into the state's business registry database. It cost $20 to access the detailed filings, a small price for the truth. I typed in the name, Brooks Orchard Holdings, LLC, status, active. I frowned. I clicked on the filing history. The company had indeed been dissolved 8 years ago, right around the time I graduated college, but there was a new filing, dated 14 months ago, articles of reinstatement. My parents had brought the dead company back to life. I scrolled down to the list of officers, Graham Brooks, President, Lorna Brooks, Secretary, and there, listed as Treasurer, Marlo Brooks. My 27-year-old sister, who had called me 6 months ago asking to borrow rent money because she had spent her paycheck on a trip to Tulum, was the treasurer of a corporate entity. I dug deeper. Why revive a dead orchard? The land was mostly fallow, the farmhouse falling down. It didn't generate income. Unless the land wasn't the point, I switched to the county recorder's office website. I searched the parcel number associated with the orchard's address. There it was, a mortgage recording, dated 3 weeks ago. Borrower, Brooks Orchard Holdings, LLC. Lender, Vantage Commercial Capital. Amount, $1,500,000. My breath hitched. They weren't farming apples. They were borrowing against the land. They were refinancing the property to pull out equity. But to close a commercial loan of that size, especially on a family asset, the lender would require clear title and the consent of all beneficial owners. If the orchard had been placed in a trust by my grandmother, which seemed likely, given the timeline, then the beneficiaries of that trust would have to sign off on the loan. I looked back at the waiver on my table. Voluntary relinquishment of beneficiary interest. They didn't just want to disown me because I was unstable. They needed me off the title. I was a roadblock to a $1.5 million payout, and they had staged a public execution to scare me into signing my name before the lender's deadline. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Meet me at the Kettle on Route 9. 1 hour. Diane. The Kettle was a roadside diner about 40 minutes outside the city. The kind of place where truckers and third-shift nurses ate eggs at 2 in the afternoon. It was neutral ground. It was also nowhere near the country club circle my parents inhabited. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a booth near the back, watching the door. When Diane Brooks Keller walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. I hadn't seen my aunt in 5 years. She looked older, her face lined with the kind of hard-won character my mother would have tried to Botox away. She wore a denim jacket and boots that looked like they had actually walked through mud. She slid into the booth opposite me without a hug. She ordered black coffee from the waitress before looking me in the eye. "You look like hell." "Sadie," she said. "Thanks," I said. "I feel like I have been run over by a parade float." Diane took a sip of the coffee as soon as it arrived. "It is not a parade float. It is a tank. Graham and Lorna do not do things by accident." I pushed the printout of the property records across the table. "I know about the loan." I said, $1.5 million? They are refinancing the orchard." Diane looked at the paper, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "You are faster than I was. It took me 2 years to figure out why they cut me off." "Why did they?" I asked. "Because I wanted to sell my share." She said, "Mom, Eleanor, left the orchard in a trust. It was supposed to be for all of us. Me, Graham, and a small percentage for the grandkids to access later. But Graham wanted to develop it. Condos. I said no. I wanted to keep the trees." She leaned back. "So, suddenly, I was the drug addict. I was the one who couldn't be trusted with money. They went to my boss. They went to my ex-husband. They painted a picture of a woman spiraling out of control. Eventually, I just wanted it to stop. So I signed over my interest for a fraction of what it was worth. Just to get my name out of their mouths." I felt a cold shiver. It was the same playbook. They have always managed conflict through image control. Diane said, "The Brooks family reputation is the only thing Graham actually worships. If you threaten the story, you get isolated. Then you get rewritten." "I am not threatening the story." I said, "I haven't asked for anything." "You exist," Diane said. "That is the threat. And now, you are 30. Under the original terms of Eleanor's trust, the ones I saw 20 years ago, the grandchildren's shares vest fully at age 30. I stared at her. "Vest fully?" Diane nodded. "Before 30, the trustees, your parents, manage the money. They decide if you get distributions. But at 30, you get a seat at the table, you get a vote, and if they want to mortgage the land to the hilt to cover their bad investments, they need your vote, or they need you gone." I thought about the waiver again. Voluntary relinquishment. They tried to get me to sign this 2 weeks ago. I said, "They dated it back." Diane's eyes narrowed. "Check your email." "Sadie." "What?" "Check your old emails. From when you were 21 or 22. Right after Eleanor died. Why? Because they build the narrative slowly." Diane said, "They don't just spring a trap. They lay the bricks one by one." I pulled out my phone. I searched my Gmail archive. I typed in mom and sign. Dozens of results. Most were innocuous. Permission slips, college forms. But there were a few from the year my grandmother died. Subject: quick signature needed for grandma's estate. Date: November 12th, 7 years ago. "Hi Sadie. Just need you to sign this attached PDF. It is just a standard formality for the tax filing on grandma's estate. Dad says we need it by 5 o'clock or we get penalized. Love you. Mom." I opened the attachment on the tiny screen. It was a single page. Waiver of accounting. I scrolled to another one. Subject: one more thing. Date: February 4th, 6 years ago. "Sadie, honey, the lawyer needs this one signed too. It just says you trust Dad to handle the administrative stuff, so we do not have to pay for a court audit. Saves the family money. Thanks. Consent to independent administration." I looked up at Diane. I felt sick. I signed them. I whispered. I signed all of them. I didn't even read them. I was 22. I was grieving. "I thought I was helping. You gave them permission to operate in the dark." Diane said, "You waived your right to see the books. You waived your right to an audit. They have been building a legal file labeled, 'Sadie is compliant and disinterested,' for 8 years, and now that I am 30 and about to get actual power." I said, realizing the endgame, "They need to pivot. They can't use compliant anymore because I would ask questions about $1 million loan. So they have to switch to incapable." Diane nodded. "Exactly. An unstable daughter cannot be a trustee. An unstable daughter needs to be protected from herself. They disowned you to invalidate your future objection to the loan." I drove back to the city with a feeling of clarity that was sharper than rage. I didn't go home. I went to Marlowe's apartment building. Marlowe lived in a high-rise in the trendy part of Warren Harbor, a building with a doorman and a lobby that smelled like white tea. I didn't call up. I waited in the lobby, sitting in a wingback chair behind a large potted fern. I knew her schedule. She had a Pilates class at 5:30. At 6:45, she walked in. She was wearing leggings and a cropped hoodie, carrying a green juice. She looked healthy. She looked unburdened. I stood up and intercepted her before she reached the elevator bank. "Marlowe?" She jumped, nearly dropping her juice. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. She looked around the lobby, checking for witnesses. "Sadie?" she hissed. "You cannot be here," Dad said. I do not care what Dad said. I interrupted, keeping my voice low and pleasant. "We need to talk. 5 minutes." She looked at the doorman, who was watching us. She sighed, her shoulders dropping. "Fine, but not upstairs. Over there." She pointed to a seating area in the corner, away from the front desk. We sat down. She kept her distance, perched on the edge of the sofa like I was contagious. "I know about Brooks Orchard Holdings," I said. Marlowe's face went blank. It was a good poker face, but I saw her grip tighten on her phone. "I don't know what that is." "Stop it." "Marlowe," I said, "I saw the filings. You are the treasurer. You are helping them refinance the land to pull out $1.5 million. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, the fear vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, flat annoyance. "So?" she said. "So?" I repeated. "You helped them humiliate me in front of my entire life to push a loan through? It wasn't about the loan, Sadie. It was about survival." "Survival? You are wearing a $300 hoodie." Marlowe leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Dad is leveraged, okay? He made some bad calls on the industrial park development. If he doesn't get liquidity by the end of the quarter, things get ugly. The orchard is the only thing with equity left." "And my share?" I asked. "You were never going to agree to the loan," Marlowe said. "You would have asked for spreadsheets. You would have delayed it. You would have made it messy. So you decided to destroy my reputation instead?" "We didn't destroy it," Marlowe said calmly. "We just managed it. If you had just signed the waiver when Dad sent it, the party would have been fine. We would have had cake. You forced our hand." I looked at my sister. I searched for the little girl I used to share a bunk bed with. She wasn't there. Sitting in front of me was a junior partner in the firm of Graham and Lorna. She didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a liability to the balance sheet. "You emailed my HR department." I said. "You told them I was delusional. I was protecting the narrative," Marlowe said, as if stating a fact. "If you try to sue us to stop the loan, we need proof that you are acting irrationally. It is just strategy." "Sadie, don't take it so personally." "Don't take it personally?" I asked, feeling a laugh bubble up in my chest. It was a dark, dangerous laugh. "You tried to get me fired." "I tried to get you to fold," Marlowe corrected. "Just sign the paper." "Sadie, take the 10,000. Walk away. You can be the victim. You love being the independent victim. It suits you." She stood up. "I have to go. Don't come here again. If you do, I will call the police and tell them you were harassing me. And given the email I sent to your work, they will probably believe me." She walked to the elevators without looking back. I sat there for a moment, listening to the soft jazz playing in the lobby. I realized then that Marlowe was gone. The sister I thought I had was a fiction. I was fighting a system, and she was a cog. My phone buzzed again. It was Tessa. "Sadie, heads up, a girl named Marlowe just DM'd me on Instagram. She is asking if I have seen you acting erratic lately. She says the family is trying to build a support plan for you. She asked if you have been drinking more than usual." I stared at the screen. She was actively canvassing for witness statements. She was trying to weaponize my friends against me. I didn't reply to Tessa immediately. I didn't want to vent. Venting was what unstable people did. I needed a professional. 2 days later, I sat in the office of Calder Rowe. He was a trust and estate litigator recommended by the legal clinic. His office was in a glass tower downtown, smelling of leather and intimidation. Calder himself was a sharp-edged man in his 50s, with eyes that looked like they had seen every possible variation of human greed. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He looked at the waiver. He looked at the property records. He looked at the email from Marlowe. When I finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "It is a classic squeeze," he said. His voice was dry, clinical. "They have a liquidity crisis. You have a vesting interest. They need your consent to encumber the asset. They know you won't give it, or they are afraid you will demand your share of the loan proceeds. So, they create a situation where you are forced to disclaim your interest." "Disclaim?" I asked. "Sign it away," he said. "If you sign this document, you are telling the world you want nothing to do with the trust. It cleans the title. The bank gives them the money. You get nothing. And the disowning?" "Theater," Calder said. "It serves two purposes. One, it puts emotional pressure on you to settle. Two, if you refuse to sign and they have to go to court to remove you as a trustee, they have already planted the seeds that you are unfit. They are creating a history of conflict where you are the aggressor. So what do I do?" I asked. "Do not sign." "Obviously," Calder said. "But we need to find out exactly what your status is. You said you signed waivers in your 20s? "Yes. That hurts us," Calder admitted. "It limits our ability to demand past accounting. However, it does not erase your beneficial interest. You are still an owner. Sadie, unless what? Unless there is a mechanism in the trust we don't know about." He tapped the table. "We need the trust instrument. The actual document your grandmother wrote. They won't give it to us voluntarily. We will have to file a petition to compel a copy. That takes time." "I don't have time," I said. "They are trying to close the loan now." Calder looked at my financial file, which I had brought with me. He was leafing through my bank statements. "Wait," he said. He stopped at a page from 3 years ago. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to a line item. I looked. "Deposit, NFS Dis B, $42.15. "It is interest," I said, "from the savings account." Calder shook his head. "Interest on a savings account with $50 in it is not $40 a month. That is a 5% yield on $10,000. Or, it is a dividend." He flipped the pages. The deposit was there every month, tiny. Consistent, always from NFS DISP. I never paid attention to it. I admitted. I just thought, I don't know. I thought the bank had a good rate. Calder pulled out his laptop. NFS, North Pine Fiduciary Services. They are a third-party administrator. They handle back-office distributions for mid-sized trusts. He looked at me. "Someone has been paying you." "Sadie, every month, for years." "Who?" "The trust," Calder said. "It is likely a mandatory income distribution. Small, but automatic. If you are receiving this, you are an active beneficiary. They haven't removed you." He picked up his office phone. "I am going to call them. I will put it on speaker. Be quiet." He dialed the number for North Pine. After a maze of automated menus, a human voice answered. "North Pine Fiduciary. This is Greg." "Hi, Greg. This is Calder Rowe's office calling regarding the Eleanor Brooks Trust. We are doing a routine audit for a beneficiary, Sadie Brooks. We just need to verify the address on file for the monthly K1 generation." Calder's voice was breezy, administrative. He sounded like a bored clerk. "1 second, Greg said. I heard typing. "Okay. Eleanor Brooks Trust. Sadie Brooks. Yes. We have the address as 4402 Maplewood. That was my parents' address." "Ah, we need to update that," Calder said. "But she is still listed as a current income beneficiary?" "Yes, sir," Greg said. "Status is active. Class B beneficiary. We haven't received the updated beneficiary instructions yet, though there was a note in the file that a change was pending." Calder's eyes locked onto mine. A note that a change was pending. "Oh?" Calder asked casually. "What kind of change?" Greg hesitated. It says, "Pending relinquishment. Dated October 14th. We are just waiting for the signed copy to process the removal." "Got it. Calder said. "We will get that sorted. Thanks, Greg." Calder hung up. The room was silent. "They haven't done it," Calder said softly. "They can't do it." I felt the air rush back into my lungs. "They told North Pine I was relinquishing my rights 2 weeks before the party." Calder said, "They told the bank the title was clear pending a signature. They bet everything on you breaking, but I'm still on the list." I said, "You are still on the list," Calder confirmed, "and that means you own part of that orchard, and they cannot close that loan without you." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. "The whole party," I said, realizing the full scope of the manipulation. The microphone, the guests, Marlowe's speech, the email to HR. It wasn't about punishment. It was a deadline. They have to close the loan. Calder said, "They probably have a rate lock expiring, or a balloon payment due on another debt. They are desperate, if they are desperate." I said, turning back to him, "Then they are dangerous. But they are also vulnerable," Calder said, "because they lied to the bank. And they lied to the trust administrator. They claimed a relinquishment that doesn't exist." I picked up my purse. I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by the cold, hard hum of strategy. "I am not going to sign." I said, "Good," Calder said. "So what is your next move?" I looked at him. "I am going to let them think I am broken." I said, "I am going to let them think I am about to fold. And then I am going to ask for the one thing they can't give me." "What is that?" "The truth." I said. I left the office. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Warren Harbor. I took out my phone and looked at the picture of the waiver again. Pending relinquishment. They thought they could erase me with a keystroke. They thought Sadie Brooks was a problem they could solve with a little pressure and a lot of shame. They were about to find out that I was not a problem to be solved. I was a glitch in their system, and I was about to crash the whole thing. The following Monday began with the silence of a siege. I sat at my kitchen table, which had been transformed into a command center. Stacks of paper covered the wood, bank statements, the printout of the reinstated orchard filing, and the draft letter Calder Rowe had prepared. We were going on the offensive. Calder had explained the strategy. We could not just ask for information. We had to demand it under the specific statutes governing trust beneficiaries. We drafted formal requests to North Pine Fiduciary Services, demanding a full accounting of the Eleanor Brooks Trust. We sent a separate demand to the registered agent of Brooks Orchard Holdings, requesting the operating agreement and minutes from the meeting where the mortgage was authorized. I signed the letters with a pen that felt heavy in my hand. It was a strange feeling, initiating legal action against the people who had taught me how to ride a bike. But the parents who taught me to ride a bike were gone. They had been replaced by a corporation that viewed me as a liability. I went to the post office to mail them certified. I wanted the tracking numbers. I wanted the receipts. I was learning that in this war. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. When I arrived at Bayside Analytics an hour later, the atmosphere was brittle. I walked to my desk, keeping my head high, but I could feel the side-eye glances. The office rumor mill was a powerful engine, and Marlowe had poured sugar in the tank. At 10 o'clock, the internal messaging system pinged. "Sadie, please come to HR, room 404, room 404. The irony wasn't lost on me. Error, not found. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the gray carpet. I took a deep breath. Visualizing a wall of glass between me and whatever was waiting in that room, I was an analyst. I dealt in facts. Inside, the HR director, a woman named Karen, who usually only spoke to me about open enrollment periods, was sitting with a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a generic suit and holding a notepad. "Sadie, have a seat," Karen said. Her voice was too soft. It was the voice you used for a frightened animal. I sat down, placing my hands on the table. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Karen exchanged a look with the man. "Sadie, this is Mark from our Employee Assistance Program. We wanted to have a check-in." "A check-in," I repeated. "We received another communication this morning." Karen said, "From a concerned party. They reported that you might be in the middle of a personal crisis that could impact your decision-making abilities. I felt the heat rise in my neck, but I forced my pulse to slow down. Who was the party? We cannot disclose that, Mark said gently, but given the nature of the report, allegations of erratic behavior, potential substance misuse, we have to take it seriously. We want to make sure you have resources. I looked at them. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to follow protocol. They were reacting to a data point they assumed was valid. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I opened it and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Karen, Mark, I appreciate your concern. I said, my voice was steady. It was the voice I used when presenting quarterly findings to the board. However, you are being used as leverage in a legal dispute regarding a family trust. Karen looked at the paper. It was a cease and desist letter Calder had drafted for Marlowe. Though we hadn't sent it yet, it outlined the pattern of harassment. The reports you are receiving are not expressions of care. I continued. They are manufactured evidence. My family is currently attempting to force me to sign away a 7-figure asset. To do that, they need to establish a record of instability. By logging these complaints, they are hoping to create a paper trail they can use in court. Karen stopped reading. She looked up, her eyes wide. I am not in crisis. I said, I am under attack. There is a difference. I pointed to the document. I am requesting that any future communications from Marlowe Brooks or Graham Brooks be logged not as personnel issues, but as external harassment. I would also like a copy of every email sent to this office regarding my employment, to be included in my legal file. Mark closed his notepad. He looked uncomfortable. This is a legal matter? It is a financial matter, I said, and I will not allow Bayside Analytics to be weaponized as a tool for extortion. Karen nodded slowly. She pushed the paper back toward me, then pulled it back. Can I keep this copy? Please, I said. I walked out of the room 5 minutes later. My hands were shaking, but only slightly. I hadn't cried. I hadn't begged. I had turned their ambush into an exhibit. That evening, I went to Tessa's apartment. She had texted me in all caps. You need to see this. Tessa was sitting on her floor, her laptop open, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. She didn't say hello. She just pointed at the screen. I went through the raw footage from the party. She said, Tessa worked in digital marketing. She lived her life in 4K resolution. She had asked everyone who attended the party, our friends, the coworkers, to send her any photos or videos they had taken, claiming she wanted to make a support montage for me. Realistically, she was looking for evidence. I found this in a clip Ben took. She said, he was filming the buffet table, zooming in on the appetizers. It was early, like 6:30. Before most people arrived, she pressed play. The video was shaky. It showed plates of crab cakes and expensive cheese. The audio was the ambient noise of the room, clinking glasses, the hum of the HVAC. But then, in the background, faint but distinct, a voice cut through. We are here to disown you. It was my father's voice. Then, a pause. No, that is too aggressive. Try it with more sorrow. We are here to disown you. My mother's voice murmured something indistinguishable. Then my father again. We are here to formally disown you. We do this to protect the family. Tessa paused the video. He was rehearsing. She whispered, like he was practicing for a play. I stared at the frozen image of a crab cake. I felt a cold sickness in my gut. I had known it was planned. I had known about the timeline, but hearing him practice the inflection, hearing him try to find the right level of sorrow to sell the lie, it was sociopathic. It proves premeditation. I said, it proves malice. There is more, Tessa said. She closed the laptop and reached for her purse. She pulled out a card. It was a birthday card. Generic, floral. The envelope was torn. You know how you were looking for that note? The one from your aunt? Or grandmother? I nodded. Lorna took it. The manager said so. Lorna took the pile. Tessa corrected. She swept the table. But this fell. She handed me the card. I found it under the tablecloth when I was helping clean up. Tessa said. It must have slid off when the table was bumped. I didn't think anything of it until you mentioned the missing envelope. I opened it this morning. I took the card. It wasn't in an envelope anymore. It was just the cardstock. Inside. The handwriting was shaky. The ink slightly faded. It was Eleanor's script. I recognized the loop of the L and the sharp cross of the T. My dearest Sadie, happy 30th birthday. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you have reached the age where the world expects you to be fully yourself. I have left things in a way that I hope protects you, but I know my son, and I know his wife. They love the picture of the family more than the people in it. If they ever try to make you small, if they ever try to tell a story about you that isn't true, do not argue with them. Look for the file in the blue tin. Love, Grandma. I read the line again. Look for the file in the blue tin. The blue tin. I closed my eyes. A memory flashed. Bright and sharp. I was 10 years old, sitting on the floor of my grandmother's sunroom. She had a tin box, an old Danish cookie container, royal blue with a picture of a palace on the lid. She used to keep sewing supplies in it, but sometimes she would put other things in there. Treasure, a silver dollar, a feather, a secret. This is our vault. Sadie, she had said, for the things we don't want the world to touch. I opened my eyes. I have that tin. I said, You do? Tessa asked. I took it when we cleared out her house. Mom wanted to throw it away. She said it was junk. I grabbed it because it smelled like her. Where is it? Storage, I said. Not the unit they locked me out of. My closet? The top shelf. We drove to my apartment. I didn't even take off my coat. I went straight to the bedroom, dragged a chair over to the closet, and reached for the highest shelf. There were shoeboxes. There was a bag of winter scarves. And there, pushed all the way to the back, was the blue tin. It was rusted around the rim. The picture of the palace was scratched. I pulled it down. It rattled. I sat on the bed. Tessa sat next to me. I pried the lid off. It resisted for a moment, then popped open with a metallic snap. Inside, there were no cookies. There were no sewing needles. There was a silver key, a heavy old-fashioned safe deposit key with a number stamped on it, 402, and a piece of paper, notebook paper, folded into a tight square. I unfolded it. It was a list. Witnesses who will remember the truth. 1. Diane Brooks Keller. She knows the pattern. 2. Dr. Eris Thorne. He treated me when Graham tried to say I was senile. 3. Reed Halston. He wrote the clause. I stopped. Reed Halston. The man standing in the back of the room at my party. The man I thought was there as my parents' hired gun. He wrote the clause. He wasn't there to witness my execution. He was there because the trust required him to be there. He is the architect. I whispered. What? Tessa asked. Reed Halston. My grandmother lists him as a witness to the truth. But he was standing with my parents. Maybe he turned. Tessa said. Maybe they bought him. Or maybe he is trapped. I said. I looked at the key. 402. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I wore for client presentations. I walked into the offices of Halston Associates. The receptionist looked up, surprised. Do you have an appointment? No. I said, Tell Mr. Halston that Sadie Brooks is here. Tell him I found the blue tin. The receptionist frowned, but she picked up the phone. She whispered something, waited, then hung up. He will see you, she said. Reed Halston's office was a corner suite overlooking the harbor. It was lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with legal reporters that looked like they hadn't been opened in 20 years. Reed was standing by the window. He turned as I entered. He looked older than he had at the party. He looked tired. Sadie, he said, I was wondering when you would come. You were at my birthday. I said, I didn't sit down. He admitted. You stood there while my father humiliated me. You watched my mother lie. You saw them recording it. I did. Why? I asked. My grandmother said you were a witness to the truth. She put you on a list. Reed sighed. He walked over to his desk and sat down heavily. He gestured for me to sit. Your grandmother was a brilliant woman, Sadie. She knew exactly who your parents were. She knew that Graham has a flexibility with the truth when he is under pressure. He picked up a pen and turned it over in his fingers when we drafted the trust. Eleanor was worried. She knew that when you turned 30, Graham would want to access your share of the capital. She knew he would try to pressure you, and she predicted that if pressure didn't work, he would try to disqualify you. Disqualify me how? The morality clause. Reed said, it is a standard provision in old money trusts. If a beneficiary engages in public misconduct that brings severe reputational harm to the family, the trustees can petition to remove them. That is what they were doing. I said, the party, the scene, the recording. They were manufacturing public misconduct. Reed nodded. They came to me a month ago. They said you were spiraling. They said you were drinking, making scenes, embarrassing the family name. They wanted to invoke the clause. And you believe them? I am a lawyer. Sadie. I don't believe anyone. I look at evidence. I told them that the clause requires proof. Hearsay isn't enough. So they created the proof. I said, they staged the party so they could catch me making a scene on camera, and they invited you to watch. Reed looked down at his desk. They invited me to verify the misconduct. They wanted me to certify that you were out of control. And will you? I asked. Will you sign their affidavit saying I am unstable? Reed looked up. His eyes were gray and unreadable. I haven't signed anything yet, he said. But Sadie, you need to understand, they are the trustees. They have a lot of power. And unless there is a counter-narrative, unless there is proof that their actions were malicious, the clause is dangerous. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver key. What is this? Reed asked. You tell me. I said, I found it in the tin. With your name. Reed stared at the key. A slow realization spread across his face. She kept it. He whispered. Kept what? The verification mechanism, Reed said. He stood up. He walked over to a safe in the corner of his office. He dialed in a combination and pulled out a file. Eleanor didn't just write a morality clause. Sadie. She wrote a defense against it. She didn't trust me fully, either. She didn't trust anyone. She split the instructions. He held up the file. I have the trust instrument, but the letter of intent, the document that explains how to interpret the clause in the event of a dispute, she locked that away. She said, if Graham ever tries to burn Sadie down, make sure she has the water. He pointed to the key. That is the water. Where is the box? I asked. First National, Reed said. Downtown branch. I stood up. Thank you. Sadie, Reed called out as I reached the door. I turned. They are going to file the removal petition tomorrow, he said. They are submitting the video from the party and the affidavits from the guests. If you want to stop them, you need what is in that box. I walked to the bank. It was only 3 blocks away, but the walk felt like a pilgrimage. The wind was whipping off the harbor, cold and biting. I entered the bank and asked for the safe deposit vault. The attendant, a young woman with bright red lipstick, checked my ID. You are a signer on box 402? She asked. I have the key, I said, and the authorization from the executor should be on file. She checked her computer. Eleanor Brooks, deceased, deputy signer. Sadie Brooks, added 8 years ago. She nodded. Follow me. The vault was silent and smelled of cool metal and old paper. She led me to a wall of boxes. She unlocked her side, then waited for me to insert my key. I turned it. The lock clicked. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. She closed the door. I sat alone with the box. I opened the lid. There was no money, no jewelry. There was a thick document bound in blue legal paper and a letter, sealed in a plastic sleeve. I picked up the document first. Memorandum of Trust Intent. I flipped through the pages until I found the section highlighted in yellow. Section 14, B, the anti-sabotage provision. In the event that the trustees, Graham and/or Lorna Brooks, attempt to invoke the morality clause against any beneficiary, specifically Sadie Brooks, The burden of proof shall not rest on the beneficiary to defend her character. Instead, the trust requires independent verification that the misconduct was not provoked, staged, or incited by the trustees themselves. I read it twice: provoked, staged, or incited. My grandmother had known. She had watched my parents operate for decades. She knew they didn't just react to drama, they directed it. She had written a clause that specifically stripped them of their power if they were the ones who started the fire. I picked up the letter. My darling Sadie, if you are reading this, they have tried it. I am sorry. I know how much it hurts to be painted as the villain in your own family. I watched them do it to Diane. I watched them do it to your grandfather when he got sick. They use shame as a weapon. They think that if they make you look crazy, no one will listen to you. They think that if they embarrass you enough, you will hide. But you are not a hider. You are a seeker. This memo is your shield. It requires them to prove their hands are clean, and we both know their hands are never clean. Use this. Take your place. Do not let them steal your orchard. Do not let them steal your name. Love, Grandma. I sat in the quiet room, holding the letter, the party, the rehearsal, the recording. It all fell into place. They hadn't just been cruel. They had been trying to navigate this specific legal maze. They needed misconduct, but they needed it to look spontaneous. They needed me to explode so they could say, "See, we didn't do this. She did." But they had failed, because I hadn't exploded. I had asked a question. Why did you insist on paying for tonight? And because Ben had recorded the rehearsal. We are here to disown you. That was incitement. That was staging. I had the video. I had the timeline of the waiver. I had the L. Brooks theft of the note. And now, I had the rule book that said none of their evidence counted if I could prove they set the stage. I put the documents back in the box, but I kept the copies I needed. I locked the box. I walked out of the bank. The sun was fully set now. The streetlights were humming. I took out my phone. I had a text from Calder Row. They just served us. Petition for removal of beneficiary filed. Hearing set for Friday. I typed back, "Let them come." I found the water. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I wasn't just fighting for an apology. I was fighting to prove that my reality was real. They had spent 30 years editing the footage of our lives, cutting out the parts where they were cruel, zooming in on the parts where I was imperfect, but the editing room was closed. I had the raw files, and on Friday, I was going to play them for the world. The conference room in Calder Row's office looked less like a legal sanctuary and more like a war room. We had covered the mahogany table with the anatomy of a conspiracy. To an outsider, it might have looked like a scatter of random documents, a grainy screenshot from a video, a sworn affidavit from a neighbor, a certified mail receipt, and a timeline drawn in black marker on a whiteboard. To me, it was a beautiful, terrible picture of betrayal. "We are building a narrative of incitement," Calder said, pacing the length of the room. He was in his element, his sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. "The anti-sabotage provision in your grandmother's memo is specific. It says the trustees cannot trigger the morality clause if they staged the event. We have to prove the party wasn't a birthday celebration that went wrong. We have to prove it was a trap that went right." He pointed to the whiteboard. "Exhibit A," he said, "the lock change." I looked at the statement Mrs. Gable, my parents' neighbor, had reluctantly provided. It was brief, just 3 sentences, confirming she saw a locksmith van in the driveway on Thursday morning. 2 days before the party, if they changed the locks on Thursday, Calder said, they had already decided you were estranged. The decision was made. He moved his hand to the next item. Exhibit B, the waiver, the document I had received in the mail, dated October 14th. They drew up the legal surrender of your rights 2 weeks before the alleged misconduct occurred. Calder said, "This proves the disowning wasn't a reaction to your behavior at the party." The party was the theater they needed to justify the paperwork they had already drafted. "And Exhibit C," I said, pointing to the laptop on the table. "The rehearsal. We played the clip again, my father's voice, tinny and distant, practicing the line, 'We are here to disown you,' like he was testing a microphone for a karaoke night. It is devastating, Calder said, but it is still circumstantial. A judge might say he was just preparing for a difficult conversation. We need one more thing. We need to know who cast the audience. The audience. The 4 older strangers standing in the back. The witnesses. I picked up my phone. I had the list from the blue tin, but I also had the guest list from the venue, which I had subpoenaed from the manager. Miriam Voss. She was the woman who had recorded the speech. She was the one my mother had looked at for the cue. I found her number in an old parish directory online. My hands felt cold as I dialed. It rang 4 times. I expected voicemail. Hello? Her voice was sharp, guarded. Mrs. Voss? This is Sadie Brooks. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy pause where I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. I do not think we should be speaking. Sadie, she said finally. Your mother said, Mrs. Voss, I cut in, keeping my voice gentle but firm. I am not calling to argue. I am calling because I am currently compiling witness statements for a legal review of the trust. I know you were at the party. I know you recorded the toast. I didn't do anything wrong, she said quickly. Her defensiveness was a crack in the armor. I know you didn't. I lied. I know you were just doing what my mother asked. I just need to clarify one timeline detail. When did she ask you to come? There was another pause. Sadie, please, I don't want to get involved in family business. It became family business when my father announced it into a microphone. Mrs. Voss, please, just the date. Did she call you the day of the party? No, Miriam whispered. She called me on Tuesday. Tuesday, 4 days before. And what did she say? I asked. She said, Miriam hesitated. She said they were going to have to make a very hard announcement. She said they needed friends in the room who understood the burden of a difficult child. She asked me to come support them. She said it would be brave. My mother had framed her public cruelty as an act of courage. Did she tell you to record it? I asked. She said it might be important to have a record, in case you tried to twist their words later. Thank you. Mrs. Voss, I said, that is all I needed. I hung up. I looked at Calder. She was invited 4 days prior to witness a hard announcement, I said. Lorna told her to record it to protect the narrative. Calder capped his marker. That is it. That is the ball game. They didn't disown you because you made a scene. They invited an audience to watch them disown you, and they handed out the cameras. We had the evidence. Now we needed the motive. I knew about the loan. I knew about the orchard, but I needed to understand the urgency. Why now? Why so desperate that they would burn down their relationship with me in front of 40 people? The answer, I suspected, lay with the treasurer of Brooks Orchard Holdings, Marlowe. I didn't chase her this time. I waited. I knew my sister. She was reactive. If she felt the walls closing in, she would reach out. I had sent a copy of the anti-sabotage memo to her personal email without a subject line earlier that morning. At 7 o'clock that evening, my buzzer rang. I checked the monitor. It was Marlowe. She was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses. Even though it was dark out, she looked like a celebrity trying to avoid the paparazzi, or a criminal trying to avoid the feds. I buzzed her up. She walked into my apartment and didn't take off the sunglasses. She stood in the middle of my living room, vibrating with anxiety. You are ruining everything, she said. No hello. No, how are you? I sat on a bar stool at my kitchen island. I am not the one who revived a dead company to take out a predatory loan. Marlowe. She flinched. She took off the glasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked exhausted, stripped of the glossy veneer she usually wore like armor. You don't understand, she said. Her voice cracked. Then explain it to me. I said, Why, Marlowe? You have a trust fund. Mom and Dad have the portfolio. Why do you need $1.5 million of hard money against a rotting orchard? Because the portfolio is gone. Sadie, she screamed. The silence that followed was absolute. What? I asked. Marlowe slumped onto my sofa. She put her head in her hands. Dad leveraged it. She said, her voice muffled, 2 years ago. He went heavy into a commercial development in the West End. He thought it was a sure thing. It wasn't. The contractor walked. The permits got pulled. He is underwater. Sadie. He is so far underwater he can't see the surface. I stared at her. My father, the man who lectured me on fiscal responsibility because I bought a latte, had gambled the family fortune on a strip mall. And you? I asked. Why are you listed as treasurer? Because my credit was the only thing clean enough to open the new entity. She whispered. They used me. Sadie. They said if I didn't help, we would lose the house. We would lose the club membership. We would lose everything. So the loan isn't for the orchard. I said. It is to pay off the bad debt. It is a bridge loan, Marlowe said. High interest. Short term. Just to stop the bleeding until he can sell the West End lot. But the lender did a title search. They saw the trust. They saw you. And they said they needed all beneficiaries to sign. I finished. Marlowe nodded. Dad panicked. He said you would never agree. He said you would ask for an audit and the whole house of cards would fall. He said the only way to save us was to remove you, to remove me. It wasn't malice. It was math. Cold, desperate math. So the party, I started, it was the only way, Marlowe said, looking up. Her face was pleading. We had to make you ineligible. We had to trigger the morality clause so we could bypass your signature. If you were disowned for cause, the bank would accept the remaining trustee's authority. I felt a wave of nausea. It was worse than hatred. Hatred I could understand. This was just utility. I was a broken part in their machine, and they were trying to snap me off so the gears would turn. And the email to HR? I asked. The rumors about me drinking? Insurance, Marlowe said softly, in case the party wasn't enough. I looked at my sister. She was 27 years old, and she was already drowning in their toxicity. She was an accomplice, yes, but she was also a hostage. Marlowe, I said, if this loan goes through and Dad can't sell the West End lot, what happens? She looked at the floor. We lose the orchard. And since you are the treasurer and signed the guarantee, I said, you go bankrupt. She began to cry. Silent. Shaking sobs. I am scared. Sadie, I am so scared. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to be the big sister. But I couldn't. She had tried to destroy my life to save her credit score. Go home, Marlowe, I said. She stood up, wiping her face. Are you going to sign the waiver? She asked. Her voice was small. No, I said. Then they are going to come for you, she said. Harder than before. Let them come, I said. The next morning, the shield arrived. It was a letter from North Pine Fiduciary Services. Calder had expedited the request. It was formal, dry, and beautiful. R.E. Eleanor Brooks, Trust. Beneficiary Status Confirmation. Dear Ms. Brooks, in response to your inquiry, we confirm that you are currently listed as an active Class B beneficiary of the Eleanor Brooks Trust. No valid instruments of removal or relinquishment have been processed. The document titled, Pending Relinquishment, referenced in our files was never executed and holds no standing. Furthermore, we have placed a freeze on any capital distributions or asset transfers pending a full review of the Trust's governance, per the request of your legal counsel. A freeze? We had stopped the money. The reaction was immediate. At 2:00, my phone pinged with an email. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from Lorna. Subject: Family matter. Sadie, your father and I are willing to sit down. We believe this situation has spiraled out of control due to miscommunication. We are at the Crestwell Club. Meet us in the Acorn Room at 5:00. We can resolve this privately, without lawyers. Come alone. We want to fix this. I forwarded it to Calder. Response: Absolutely not alone. I am driving. Pick you up at 4:30. Crestwell Country Club was the fortress of my parents' social standing. It was a place of hunter green carpet, dark wood paneling, and the smell of old money and floor wax. I hadn't stepped foot inside in 3 years. Walking in with Calder felt like bringing a grenade into a library. The staff at the front desk stiffened when they saw me. They knew the rumors. They had probably heard the stories my parents were spinning over cocktails. But Calder, in his sharp navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase, radiated a kind of authority that made them hold the door. We walked to the Acorn Room. It was a small private dining room in the back, usually used for closing business deals. My parents were already there. Graham was sitting at the head of the table, his hands clasped over a leather folder. Lorna was next to him, wearing a pastel cardigan and a look of fragile martyrdom. But there was someone else. Reed Halston was sitting at the far end of the table. He looked uncomfortable. He was staring into a glass of water like it might contain the answers to the universe. When we walked in, Graham stood up. His face went tight when he saw Calder. I said, "Come alone." "Sadie," he barked, "this is a family meeting. This is a settlement negotiation regarding a trust dispute," Calder said smoothly, pulling out a chair for me, "and as Sadie's counsel, I am here to ensure the record is accurate." Graham looked at Reed. Reed didn't look up. "Sit down, Graham," Lorna said. Her voice was tight. "Let us just get this over with." I sat. I looked at my parents. They looked smaller than I remembered. The lighting in the room was unforgiving, and I could see the stress lines etched deep around my father's mouth. I could see the tremor in my mother's hands that she was trying to hide by gripping her napkin. "We are here," Graham began, finding his boardroom voice, "because there has been a great deal of disrespect." I stayed silent. I had learned that silence was louder than defense. Sadie's behavior at her birthday was appalling. Graham continued. "Public hostility, screaming at her mother. It was proof of exactly the kind of instability we have been worried about." "I didn't scream," I said calmly. "I asked a question. You hijacked the event." Graham slammed his hand on the table. "You made a spectacle, and because of that, we have had to take steps to protect the family assets." He pushed a document toward me. "We are willing to offer you a path forward," he said. "We will pause the petition for removal. We will keep this out of the courts. We will even issue a statement to the family friends clarifying that your outburst was a reaction to medication or stress. We will clean up your reputation." "And in exchange?" Calder asked, though he already knew. "In exchange, Sadie signs the waiver," Graham said. "She relinquishes her interest in the orchard and the trust. She accepts a one-time gift of $20,000, and she walks away. $20,000. The price had gone up. They were desperate. "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then we proceed with the morality clause," Lorna said. Her voice was soft, poisonous. "We will release the witness statements. We will release the video of you grabbing the microphone. We will paint a picture. Sadie, and by the time we are done, you won't be able to get a job dog walking in this town." It was a threat, pure and simple. I looked at Reed Halston. He was still staring at his water. "Is that your legal advice, Reed?" I asked. "That they can win a morality clause case based on a staged event?" Graham turned to Reed. "Tell her. Reed, tell her she has no case." Reed Halston cleared his throat. He looked up. He looked at Graham, then at Lorna. Then he looked at me. He saw the blue tin in my eyes. "I cannot represent you in this matter." "Graham," Reed said. The room went dead silent. "What?" Graham asked. "I am recusing myself," Reed said. He stood up. "I have a conflict of interest." "What conflict?" Lorna demanded. "You have been our attorney for 20 years. I was Eleanor's attorney first," Reed said quietly, "and I drafted the original instrument, including the memorandum regarding the verification of misconduct." Graham's face drained of color. He knew. He knew what was in the memo. He just hoped I hadn't found it. Reed looked at me. "I have advised the trustees that proceeding with a removal petition under these circumstances would be ill-advised and potentially fraudulent." He picked up his briefcase. "Good luck, Sadie." He walked out. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My parents had lost their shield. They had lost their authority figure. Now, it was just two desperate people and the daughter they had underestimated. Lorna was the first to recover. She shifted tactics instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by a weeping, tragic desperation. "Sadie, please," she said. She reached across the table. Trying to touch my hand, I pulled it back. We are doing this for you, she said. The business. It is complicated. We are trying to save the legacy. If the loan doesn't close, you lose your money. I said, not the legacy, just the money. It is the same thing, Graham shouted. He looked wild now. Panic was setting in. You ungrateful child. We gave you everything, and now you are going to let the bank take it all because you are too stubborn to sign a piece of paper? I am not stubborn. Dad, I said, I am awake. Calder stepped in. My client is not signing the waiver. In fact, we are filing a counterclaim tomorrow. We are petitioning for a full accounting of the trust's assets for the last 10 years. And we are submitting the evidence of the premeditated disowning to the court to invoke the anti-sabotage provision. Graham looked like he was going to have a stroke. Lorna looked at me with cold, hard calculation. You can't do that, she whispered. It will ruin us. You ruined yourselves, I said. You invited an audience to watch you destroy me. You can't be surprised that the audience is now watching you. Lorna leaned back. Her mask slipped completely. We can still fix the story, she said. It was a chilling sentence. Not we can fix the relationship. We can fix the story. Sign the paper. Sadie, she said, and we will fix it. We will tell everyone you are the hero. We will say you sacrificed your share to save the farm. We will give you your dignity back. I looked at her. She was offering to sell me my own reputation. She was offering to lie for me, instead of against me, but the price was my truth. I stood up. I need tonight to think. I said, Sadie, Calder warned. I just need tonight, I repeated. I walked to the door. I looked back at them. They were sitting in the wreckage of their power, terrifyingly small. I will give you my answer tomorrow. I said, we walked out to the parking lot. The air was crisp. Why did you give them time? Calder asked. You are not actually considering it. Are you? No. I said, I am not signing. Then why wait? Because I am not going to give them the answer in a private room at a country club. I said, I looked at the clubhouse. They tried to end this publicly. I said, they tried to use a stage to write me out of the family. So I'm going to use a stage to write myself back in. I said, but not their stage. Mine. I turned to Calder. Set up a formal mediation. Tomorrow, at a neutral site. Invite the witnesses. The witnesses? All of them. I said, Diane, Reed, even Miriam Voss. Why? Because, I said, unlocking my car door. If they want to talk about the family story, let's get the whole cast in the room. And this time, no one edits the footage. The conference room at Hawthorne Mediation Partners was designed to neutralize emotion. The walls were a pale, aggressively calming gray. The table was oval, eliminating the head of the table power dynamic my father thrived on. There were no microphones, no champagne flutes, and no audience of socialites. This was exactly why I chose it. I arrived 20 minutes early with Calder. We set up our side of the table like a command post. Laptop, projector, the blue tin, sitting conspicuously in the center. When my parents walked in, they looked like they had wandered into the wrong movie. Graham was wearing his country club blazer, but it hung a little loose on his shoulders. Lorna was in pearls and a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marlowe trailed behind them, looking like a ghost in a designer trench coat. They stopped when they saw the others. Sitting in the chairs along the wall were the witnesses I had invited. Aunt Diane, looking grim but resolute, and most shockingly to my parents, Miriam Voss. Graham stiffened. Why are they here? He demanded. This is a private mediation. It is a mediation regarding the administration of a family trust. Calder said calmly. These are witnesses to the events in question. Their presence is necessary to establish the facts. Lorna looked at Miriam. Miriam, you don't have to stay. You don't have to listen to this. Miriam looked at her hands. I think I should. Lorna, after what you asked me to do. Lorna's mouth tightened into a thin line, but she sat down. The mediator, a woman named Ms. Cheng, who had the demeanor of a bomb squad technician, opened the file. We are here to address the petition for removal of Sadie Brooks as a beneficiary of the Eleanor Brooks Trust, as well as the counter-petition for a full accounting of assets. She said, "Let us begin with the trustees. Mr. Brooks, you claim that your daughter has violated the morality clause of the trust?" Graham cleared his throat. He opened his leather folder. He didn't look at me. "Yes," he said. "As we have stated, Sadie has been spiraling for months. Financial instability, erratic behavior. But the breaking point was her 30th birthday party. She became hostile in a public setting. She attacked her mother and me verbally in front of 40 guests. She made a scene that brought significant embarrassment to the family name." He looked up, gaining confidence. "We have a duty to protect the trust from unstable influences." He said, "We disowned her that night because we had no choice. It was a heartbreaking decision, but a necessary one." Lorna nodded, dabbing at a dry eye. "We just want her to get help," she whispered, "and we cannot have her managing family assets while she is in this state." Ms. Chung took a note. "Okay. And the evidence of this hostility?" Graham slid a USB drive across the table. "We have witness statements, and we have the fact that she hijacked the microphone to humiliate us." Ms. Chung looked at me. "Ms. Brooks, your response?" I didn't speak. I nodded to Calder. Calder stood up. "We dispute the characterization of the event," he said. "In fact, we submit that the event was not a birthday party at all. It was a staged operation designed to manufacture the very misconduct the trustees are complaining about." Graham scoffed. "That is ridiculous." "Is it?" Calder asked. He pressed a button on the laptop. The projector screen on the wall flickered to life. It was the video clip, the one Ben had taken, the room filled with the ambient noise of clinking glasses, and then, clear as a bell, my father's voice. "We are here to disown you." Pause. "No, that is too aggressive. Try it with more sorrow. We are here to disown you." Graham went pale. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. Lorna froze, her hand halfway to her water glass. Marlowe closed her eyes. Calder let the silence stretch for 5 seconds before speaking. That was recorded at 6:30 in the evening. Calder said, "An hour before the guests arrived, Mr. Brooks was rehearsing his lines. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction to Sadie's behavior. It was a script." Graham sputtered. I was preparing. I knew it might be a difficult night. "Preparing to disown your daughter at her own birthday party?" Calder asked. "That implies you had already decided to do it." He clicked the remote. The screen changed. It showed the certified letter, the waiver I had received in the mail. "Exhibit B," Calder said. "The voluntary relinquishment form, dated October 14th, 2 weeks before the party." He clicked again. "Exhibit C, a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Gable, your neighbor, confirming that a locksmith changed the locks on the family home on October 26th, 2 days before the party." Calder turned to the mediator. "They changed the locks. They drafted the legal separation. And they rehearsed the breakup speech, all before Sadie Brooks had even arrived at the venue." He leaned his hands on the table. "This wasn't a reaction to misconduct. Ms. Cheng, it was a premeditated ambush designed to force a beneficiary to waive her rights under duress." The room was deadly quiet. Miriam Voss let out a small, shocked sound. Aunt Diane just watched her brother, her face hard. Graham looked around the room, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at Marlowe. "Tell them." "Marlowe," he snapped. "Tell them how she has been acting." Marlowe flinched. She looked at me. Then she looked at her father. She has been under a lot of stress," Marlowe said weakly. Ms. Chung looked at Marlowe. "Ms. Brooks, did you witness your sister acting erratically prior to the party?" Marlowe opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at the projector screen. She looked at the evidence that proved her parents were liars. "Marlowe," Graham warned. His voice was low, dangerous. And that was the mistake. He tried to control her in the wrong room. Marlowe snapped. "It doesn't matter," she shouted. She slammed her hand on the table. "It doesn't matter if she was erratic or not." "Marlowe," Lorna hissed. "No!" Marlowe turned to her parents. her eyes filling with angry tears. "Stop it! It is over! They know!" She looked at the mediator. "We had to do it," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and terror. "We had to get her off the title. Vantage Commercial Capital gave us a deadline, November 1st. If we didn't have the clear title by November 1st, the loan offer would expire. And if the loan expires," she looked at Graham, "then the West End project goes into default," she said, "and we lose the house, we lose the cars, we lose everything." She turned to me. "I told them you wouldn't sign," she said, her voice breaking. "I told them you were too smart. I told them you would ask for the books. So you decided to break me instead," I said softly. Marlo wiped her face aggressively. We thought if we embarrassed you enough, you would just want to leave. We thought if we made you feel small, you would sign the paper just to get away from us." She looked at me, pleading. "I didn't want to hurt you. Sadie, I just didn't want to be poor. I didn't want to lose my life." The confession hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't a morality play. It was a robbery committed by people who were terrified of losing their status. Ms. Chung looked at Graham and Lorna. Her expression had shifted from neutral to icy. "So, this petition for removal is based on financial necessity, not beneficiary misconduct?" she asked. Graham sat back, defeated. He rubbed his face with his hand. "It is not that simple," he muttered. "The family assets are complex. We were trying to save the estate for everyone, Sadie included, by disowning her?" Ms. Chung asked. "By streamlining the decision-making," Graham shouted. He pointed at me. "She has been gone for years. She doesn't care about the legacy. She just cares about her little job and her little apartment. She doesn't understand what it takes to maintain this family." I stood up. "I understand exactly what it takes." I said, "It takes lies, it takes coercion, and it takes silence." I looked at Calder. Calder reached into the blue tin. He pulled out the bound document. The Memorandum of Trust Intent. He slid it across the table to the mediator. "Ms. Cheng, I would like to introduce a governing document for the Eleanor Brooks Trust," he said, specifically, the anti-sabotage provision. Graham's head snapped up. Calder continued. "Eleanor Brooks anticipated this exact scenario. She wrote a provision stating that if the trustees attempt to invoke the morality clause, they must provide independent verification that the misconduct was not, and I quote, provoked, staged, or incited by the trustees themselves." Miss Cheng read the document. She looked up at Graham. "Mr. Brooks, given the rehearsal video and the timeline of the waiver, it appears you incited the event in question, under the terms of this trust. That invalidates your petition for removal." She closed the file. "Furthermore," she said, looking at Marlo's confession, "it appears there is a conflict of interest regarding the refinancing of the orchard." Lorna spoke up. Her voice was quiet, trembling. "We can fix this." We all looked at her. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, desperate, and terrifyingly sincere. "Sadie," she said, "we can fix this. If you just—" "Stop. Stop what?" I asked. "Stop embarrassing us," she said. I stared at her. "Look at where we are," she said, gesturing to the room. "Lawyers, mediators, witnesses. It is so ugly. We are a private family. Sadie, we don't do this. You did this," I said. "You did this on a stage with a microphone. We were trying to protect you," Lorna insisted, "from yourself, from the messiness of it all. And we can still fix it. We can issue a statement. We will say it was a misunderstanding. We will welcome you back. We will have a dinner, a nice dinner, and we will put all of this behind us." She leaned forward. "Just sign the waiver," she whispered, "and we will give you your name back." I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was the purest truth she had ever spoken. She didn't care about the money as much as she cared about the picture. She was willing to forgive me for the crime of catching her, as long as I helped her paint over the cracks. She wanted me to be an accomplice in my own erasure. I looked at the blue tin. I thought of my grandmother, hiding her truth in a cookie jar because she knew her son would try to edit her out of existence. I looked at Ms. Cheng. I would like to read a statement into the record. I said. Ms. Cheng nodded. Go ahead. I didn't have a piece of paper. I didn't need one. I am not unstable. I said, my voice steady. I am not in crisis, and I am not a victim. I looked at my father. I am a beneficiary of the Eleanor Brooks Trust. I am a 50% owner of the Brooks Orchard, and I am the daughter who remembers the truth. I turned to my mother. You offered to give me my name back if I signed away my rights. But my name does not belong to you. It belongs to me, and it is not for sale. I looked at Marlowe. I will not sign the waiver. I will not approve the loan, and I will not allow you to use my inheritance to pay for your mistakes. Graham slammed his fist on the table. Then you destroy us. If that loan doesn't close, we are bankrupt. Do you hear me? Bankrupt. Then be bankrupt. I said. The silence that followed was heavy. If you are bankrupt, I said, it is because you spent money you didn't have to impress people you don't like. That is not my tragedy. That is your accounting error. I turned to the mediator. I am requesting that the trust be frozen immediately. I am requesting a court-appointed trustee to replace Graham and Lorna Brooks, citing gross mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. And I am requesting that all future communication go through my attorney, Ms. Chung nodded. Given the evidence, I am inclined to agree. I will recommend the immediate suspension of the current trustees pending a judicial review. Graham looked like he had been shot. Lorna let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. But we weren't done. There is one more thing, Calder said. He pulled a single sheet of paper from his briefcase. This is a declaration from Reed Halston, he said. Graham looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Reed? He couldn't be here today, Calder said. But he sent this. Calder began to read. I, Reed Halston, attest that 20 years ago, Eleanor Brooks expressed to me her specific fear that her son, Graham, would one day attempt a staged public rupture to disenfranchise his daughter, Sadie. She explicitly asked me to document any attempt to use public shame as a legal lever. Calder looked up. The events of October 28th were not a surprise to the grantor of this trust. They were a predicted outcome, and she left instructions that if such an event occurred, the offending trustees should be considered in immediate violation of the bad faith clause, triggering their automatic removal. It was the final blow. My grandmother hadn't just protected me. She had reached out from the grave to fire them. Graham slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked old. He looked small. Lorna stopped crying. She looked at me with a cold, dead stare. You are enjoying this, aren't you? She hissed. You are enjoying destroying your family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had smiled for a photo while stealing a note from my dead grandmother. No, Mom, I said. I am not enjoying it. I am just finishing it. The mediation ended 20 minutes later. The terms were set. The accounts were frozen. The orchard was safe, at least from them. As we packed up, Graham and Lorna stood up. They looked at me one last time. You know, Graham said, his voice shaking, you will never be welcome in our home again. I looked at him. I looked at the fear in his eyes. I know, I said, and that is the best birthday present you ever gave me. They walked out. Marlowe followed them. But at the door, she stopped. She looked back at me. She didn't say sorry. She didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me with a strange expression. Envy. She was walking back into the prison. I was walking out. I walked out of the building into the late afternoon sun. The air was cold, but it felt good. It felt clean. Aunt Diane was waiting by her car. She walked over and hugged me. It was a fierce, tight hug. She would have been proud. Diane whispered. I nodded. I think she would. Miriam Voss was standing a few feet away. She looked awkward. I am sorry. Sadie, she said. I didn't know. I know. I said, thank you for telling the truth today. She nodded and hurried away. I turned to Calder. So, I asked, what happens now? Now? Calder smiled. Now we audit them. We find every penny they hid. We restructure the orchard. And you? He looked at me. You go live your life. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and put my hands on the wheel. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Marlo had posted a photo. It was a picture of the sunset, with the caption, "Family is everything. Praying for peace." I looked at it. The lie was still there. They were still trying to edit the story. But I didn't care. I opened my settings. I blocked Marlo. I blocked my parents. I started the car. I wasn't Sadie the victim. I wasn't Sadie the outcast. I was Sadie Brooks, the owner of an orchard, and for the first time in 30 years, the story belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to We're Here to Disown You. This story was a journey into the quiet, surgical power of truth over spectacle. I hope you enjoyed seeing Sadie dismantle the gaslighting not with screams, but with receipts. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you enjoyed Sadie's victory, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, family secrets, and the sweet taste of reclaiming your life. Let me know in the comments. Would you have signed the waiver for peace, or would you have burned it down like Sadie? I read every thought. Until next time, keep your receipts.